Welcome to Life Stories, where powerful moments of courage and transformation come to life. Today, we bring you the story of a remarkable woman who turned an act of prejudice into a movement for justice and change. What began as a humiliating moment at an airport terminal unfolded into a profound lesson in standing up for respect and equality. Her strength and resolve remind us all that one person's stand can ignite a wave of transformation. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Life Stories to follow more inspiring tales. Hit the notification bell and let's begin today's story. It was one of those mornings where the world felt alive in its quiet beauty. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the bustling city of Los Angeles. Even the usually chaotic energy of the private terminal at LAX seemed subdued, bathed in the soft light of the early day. As my car pulled up to the sleek glass entrance, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for another journey. For me, traveling was rarely just about reaching a destination, it was about maintaining the balance between the calm I carried within and the turbulence I often faced without. Stepping out of the car, I adjusted the cuffs of my tailored blazer, a subtle yet deliberate motion. My heels clicked against the polished asphalt as I walked toward the entrance, pulling my luggage behind me. I was used to attention. My stature, my poise, perhaps even my silence seemed to draw eyes in my direction. But today, something felt different. There was an energy in the air, an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. Inside the terminal, the space was a symphony of understated luxury. Marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the subtle tang of leather. Conversations drifted around me, muted yet distinct, as passengers moved with the kind of unhurried confidence that comes with privilege. But I wasn't here to indulge in the atmosphere. I was here for a purpose. The woman at the check-in counter greeted me with a professional smile, her polished uniform accentuating the efficiency she radiated. "Good morning. May I have your name and flight details?" she asked warmly. "Elena Carter," I replied, my voice calm but purposeful. "I have a reservation for the private jet to Chicago." Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she searched for my information. There was a brief pause, her brow furrowing slightly before she smoothed it out. "Yes, Dr. Carter," she said, her tone confirming my details. "The jet is ready, and the crew will begin boarding shortly. If you'd like, you can wait in the lounge, or I can escort you directly to the aircraft." I smiled politely, shaking my head. "I'll head to the jet now. Thank you." She gestured toward Gate 5, and I moved through the terminal with purpose, my steps firm against the plush carpet that transitioned into cool tile. As I neared the gate, the sight of the aircraft, gleaming under the sun's embrace, gave me a fleeting moment of satisfaction. This jet was not just a vehicle, it was a symbol of years of relentless work and sacrifice. But as I approached the entrance, my calm was disrupted. Standing at the foot of the stairs was a tall, uniformed man, his posture rigid and his expression cold. His presence didn't exude the usual professionalism I associated with pilots. Instead, his gaze seemed to pierce through me, dissecting and judging before I'd even spoken. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone clipped, almost dismissive. I took a steadying breath. "I'm here for the flight to Chicago," I said evenly, refusing to let his tone affect me. His eyes flicked to my suitcase, then back to me, a faint smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "This is a private flight. I think you might be at the wrong gate." For a moment, I said nothing, letting his words settle in the air. They were heavy with assumption, each one laced with a condescension that made my skin prickle. But I had faced this kind of dismissal before. It was not new, and it was not surprising. "This is Gate 5, correct?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "It is," he replied, his arms crossing in a defensive posture. "But this jet isn't for commercial passengers. It's for private clients." The way he emphasized the word private was deliberate, an unsubtle reminder of my supposed exclusion. I felt the sting of his judgment. But I refused to let it show. I am a private client, I stated firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. His smirk deepened, a small chuckle escaping as he shook his head. Look, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. I'm not sure what you've been told, but this isn't the kind of flight you just book online. Maybe try the main terminal, they'll get you sorted. In that moment, I felt my patience waver. I could feel the weight of his assumptions pressing down on me, the silent message that I did not belong here. But instead of reacting, I tightened my grip on my suitcase and took another breath. Before I could respond, another voice interrupted. Is there a problem here? A flight attendant approached, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. She looked between me and the pilot, her expression curious but wary. She thinks she's on this flight, the pilot said, his words carrying a mocking edge. The attendant's eyes swept over me, her gaze lingering on my shoes and my luggage before returning to my face. There was doubt there, subtle but undeniable. Do you have any documentation for this flight? She asked, her tone neutral but edged with skepticism. I calmly retrieved my phone, pulling up the confirmation email, handing it to her. I watched as her expression shifted, first to surprise, then to a carefully masked professionalism. Everything seems to be in order, she said, her voice faltering slightly. She turned to the pilot. I'll inform the crew. The pilot stepped aside reluctantly, his irritation evident. As I walked past him, I could feel his gaze burning into my back, a mixture of disbelief and resentment. But I didn't let it faze me. With my head held high, I ascended the stairs to the jet, each step a quiet declaration of defiance. Little did they know, the real confrontation had only just begun. Stepping into the jet, I was greeted by an interior that radiated opulence. The ivory leather seats, polished wooden paneling, and recessed lighting spoke to a level of luxury that had been designed to impress. A faint floral fragrance lingered in the air, mingling with the subtle scent of citrus. This wasn't just a jet, it was a space that symbolized success. And today, it would serve as the backdrop for a moment I wouldn't soon forget. As I took a moment to absorb the surroundings, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw the pilot, Captain Joel Carter, stepping aboard, his expression a mixture of irritation and defiance. Behind him, the flight attendant, Erin, followed with her clipboard clutched tightly, her eyes darting nervously between me and the pilot. A third crew member, younger and quieter, lingered near the back, her gaze firmly fixed on the ground. Captain Carter stepped forward, his posture stiff and his tone overly formal. Miss Carter, he began, his voice carrying an edge of forced politeness. I believe there's been some sort of misunderstanding. This flight was chartered under very specific arrangements. And, well, as much as I'd love to accommodate you, we need to follow protocol. I met his gaze calmly, refusing to let the condescension in his words unsettle me. I'm well aware of the arrangements, Captain, I said, my voice firm but composed. In fact, I made them myself. For a moment, he looked taken aback, the confidence in his demeanor faltering. With all due respect, he continued, attempting to recover. These arrangements are highly exclusive. Perhaps you were misinformed. Misinformed? I repeated, my tone sharp enough to cut through his charade. By whom? Exactly? The aviation department at Harper Global? Or the executive team that manages this jet? His expression shifted, the color draining slightly from his face as realization dawned. Harper Global, he echoed, the name catching him off guard. That's correct, I said, folding my arms. The holding company that owns this jet. My company. The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of my words settled over the cabin, rendering the crew momentarily speechless. Erin's clipboard trembled slightly in her hands as her eyes widened in recognition. The younger attendant glanced up, her face a picture of discomfort, while Captain Carter's jaw tightened as he struggled to maintain his composure. Erin began, her voice faltering. I wasn't aware. You assumed. I interjected, my gaze locking onto hers. You assumed I didn't belong here. You assumed I wasn't your employer. And instead of verifying the facts, you chose to belittle and dismiss me. If I hadn't stood my ground, would you have treated me any differently? Her face flushed with embarrassment as she stammered. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I pressed, my voice unwavering. Because from the moment I arrived, I've been met with nothing but hostility and prejudice. Captain Carter cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the situation. Miss Carter, I assure you. Enough, I said firmly, cutting him off. I've heard enough. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out my phone and made a call. This is Dr. Elena Carter, I said, my tone calm but authoritative. I need the terminal manager at Gate 5 immediately. There's been an incident with the crew of my jet, and I'd like to address it before departure. As I ended the call, I turned back to the crew, their discomfort palpable. You've made your assumptions about me clear, I said, my voice steady. Now let me make something clear to you. Prejudice and disrespect have no place in my company. None. I took a seat, my posture composed, my focus deliberately shifting to my tablet. The cabin was silent, save for the faint hum of the jet's engines. Outside, the sunlight glinted off the aircraft, a stark contrast to the tension inside. It was a moment of reckoning, and it was far from over. The terminal manager arrived within minutes, his hurried footsteps echoing through the cabin. His face was flushed, and he adjusted his tie nervously as he stepped aboard. Dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, he carried himself with an air of professionalism, but it was clear from his expression that he knew the gravity of the situation. Dr. Carter, he began, offering a polite nod. I came as quickly as I could. I deeply apologize for any inconvenience you've experienced. I stood, my gaze steady and unwavering. Thank you for coming, Mr. Rowland. I trust you've been briefed on what has occurred. Rowland hesitated, glancing toward the crew, who stood awkwardly to the side, their postures stiff with unease. I was informed there was an issue with the crew, he replied, his tone careful. Let me assure you, we take these matters very seriously. I gestured toward Captain Carter and the attendants, keeping my voice calm but resolute. Then let's start by addressing their behavior. From the moment I arrived, I was met with condescension, dismissal, and blatant prejudice. They made assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of, based on nothing more than my appearance. Rowland turned toward the crew, his expression hardening. Is this true? He asked, his voice sharp. Captain Carter shifted uncomfortably, his confidence visibly eroding. There was a misunderstanding, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. We didn't realize. You didn't realize what? I interrupted, my tone cutting. That I was your employer? That I own this jet? Or that I deserve basic respect? The flight attendant, Erin, took a hesitant step forward, her face pale. Dr. Carter, I truly didn't mean any harm, she stammered. I was just. You were just perpetuating the same biases that people like me have faced for generations. I said firmly. Your intentions are irrelevant. What matters are your actions, and your actions have consequences. Erin's eyes filled with tears. But I didn't let my resolve waver. Turning back to Rowland, I continued. This isn't just about me. It's about the culture of this company. Behavior like this doesn't come out of nowhere. It's a symptom of a larger issue. One that I will not tolerate. Rowland nodded quickly, his tone conciliatory. You're absolutely right, Dr. Carter. Rest assured. This will be dealt with appropriately. I've already made my decision, I said, my voice resolute. Effective immediately. Captain Carter and Erin are relieved of their duties. They no longer represent Harper Global or its values. Captain Carter's face went pale, and Erin let out a soft gasp. Please. Dr. Carter. Carter began, his voice tinged with desperation. This was an honest mistake. An honest mistake? I repeated, my tone cold. You humiliated me in front of others. You dismissed me without even verifying the facts. That wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. Roland's expression grew even graver. Understood. Dr. Carter. I'll ensure their terminations are processed immediately. Satisfied. I nodded and turned toward the cabin door. And, Mr. Roland, I added, conduct a full review of your hiring and training practices. Bias, whether conscious or unconscious, has no place in my organization. I expect a report on my desk within the week. Yes. He replied, his tone firm. Without another word, I descended the jet stairs, leaving the crew and terminal manager behind. Outside, the sun was just as bright as when I had arrived. But I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I hadn't just stood up for myself, I had taken a stand for something bigger. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. As I climbed into my waiting car, I glanced out at the jet one last time. There was still so much work to be done. But today, I had taken the first step toward ensuring that respect and fairness would prevail, not just for me, but for everyone who walked through the doors of Harper Global. The car pulled away from the terminal, its low hum providing a soothing backdrop to the whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. I sat quietly in the back seat, my hands folded neatly in my lap, gazing out at the passing cityscape. The sunlit tarmac faded from view, replaced by sprawling urban streets and towering buildings. Yet, my mind was still anchored in the confrontation, replaying the words, the looks, the weight of their assumptions. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my emails, an old habit I relied on to center myself. Among the sea of messages was one from Rebecca Langston, my trusted executive assistant. She had clearly heard about the incident already. As her subject line read, "What's next?" That was the thing about Rebecca, she never dwelled on the problem for too long. She was always looking ahead. And I needed that energy now more than ever. Dialing her number, I held the phone to my ear as her familiar voice answered. Brisk and professional as always. Dr. Carter. I was just about to call you. Roland contacted me, and let's just say he sounded rattled. I'm sure he did. I replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips. The situation was handled. But there's more to be done. I need you to start working on a plan. For the crew? Rebecca asked. No, I said, my tone firm. For the company. This wasn't just an isolated incident, it's a symptom of something deeper. I want a full review of our training and hiring practices across all Harper Global subsidiaries. And not just policies, I want cultural change. Rebecca didn't miss a beat. Understood. I'll pull the team together to start drafting recommendations. Do you want to go public with what happened? I paused, considering her question. My instinct was to shield myself from public scrutiny, to keep the incident private and contained. But that wasn't the kind of leader I aspired to be. Not yet. I said carefully. This isn't about me, it's about addressing a systemic issue. We'll craft the right narrative when the time comes. I'll get to work on it immediately, Rebecca promised. Her unwavering support was a source of comfort. A reminder that I wasn't in this fight alone. As the call ended, my driver, Marcus, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Everything all right? Dr. Carter, he asked, his deep voice laced with concern. I met his gaze in the mirror and offered a small nod. Yes. Marcus. Just another day. He smiled faintly, his eyes warm with understanding. Marcus had worked for me for years, and he had seen the battles I faced, many of them invisible to others. His quiet support had become an unspoken reassurance, one I deeply valued. The car turned onto a quieter road lined with old oak trees whose branches stretched overhead like a natural canopy. As we approached my home, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the next steps. Today had been draining, but it was far from over. This was just the beginning. When we arrived at the estate, the familiar sight of its grand stone facade and manicured gardens greeted me. The serenity of the setting was a stark contrast to the tension of the morning. But it was a reminder of how far I had come. This home wasn't just a testament to my success, it was a symbol of resilience. Of everything I had overcome to get here. Inside, I settled into my office. A spacious room filled with bookshelves and framed photographs of my family and mentors. Sitting at my desk, I opened my laptop and began to type, outlining a framework for the diversity and inclusion initiative I had envisioned. It wouldn't be easy to implement, but I knew it was necessary. If Harper Global was going to stand for something, it needed to stand for more than profit, it needed to stand for progress. As I typed, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my older brother, Marcus. Heard about what happened. Proud of you, sis. Let me know if you need anything. A lump formed in my throat as I read his words. Marcus had always been my rock. The one who reminded me of my strength even when I doubted myself. His message was a quiet affirmation of why I did what I did, not just for me, but for the community I represented. I set my phone down and returned to my work. My resolve strengthening with every word I typed. This wasn't just about correcting a single injustice. It was about creating a legacy, one that would ensure no one else would have to face what I had faced today. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the garden, I sat on my terrace with a cup of chamomile tea. The scent of lavender wafted from the carefully curated flower beds below, blending with the earthy aroma of the cooling evening air. The tranquility was welcome, though it felt at odds with the storm of emotions still swirling within me. The confrontation at the terminal, though resolved, had left its mark. It wasn't just about what had been said or done, it was about what it represented. The subtle yet searing pain of being reduced to a stereotype, of being judged unworthy before uttering a single word. I had fought that battle my entire life, and though I had grown adept at navigating it, the sting never fully dulled. The soft crunch of gravel drew my attention, and I looked up to see my older brother, Marcus, striding across the lawn toward me. He was carrying a bottle of sparkling water and a small brown paper bag, a gesture that immediately lifted my spirits. Marcus had always been the steadying presence in my life, the one who could anchor me when the world felt unmoored. Surprise, he said with a grin, setting the bag and bottle on the small glass table beside me. I figured you could use some company. I smiled, gesturing for him to sit. You always know when to show up. That's my job, he replied, settling into the chair across from me. He leaned back, his broad shoulders relaxed, but his eyes carried the same attentive gaze he'd worn since we were kids. You want to talk about it? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of where to begin. But with Marcus, I never felt the need to filter my thoughts. It's not the first time, I admitted, swirling the tea in my cup. And it won't be the last. But every time it happens, I wonder how much of this can one person change? Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. You've already changed so much, Elena. Whether you realize it or not, people notice. They see you standing up, fighting back, and it gives them hope. I looked down at my hands, tracing the rim of the cup. It just feels like a drop in the ocean. I can fire a crew, implement new policies, but does it really change anything? Or does it just push the problem further down the road? You're not just anyone making those decisions, Marcus said, leaning forward. You're Elena Harper. When you act, people pay attention. That ripple you create, it's not just a drop, it's the start of a wave. His words settled over me like a warm blanket, offering comfort and clarity. Marcus had a way of distilling complex emotions into simple truths. and I felt a renewed sense of purpose in his reminder. We sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the garden filling the space between us. Finally, I turned to him. What about the people who don't have the platform I do? The ones who are dismissed or silenced because no one's there to listen? That's exactly why you're doing this, Marcus said firmly. Not just for you, but for them. You're building something bigger, something that lasts. I nodded, his words resonating deeply. The fight wasn't just about me. It was about ensuring that no one else would have to stand alone in the face of bias and injustice. It was about creating a world where respect wasn't a privilege but a standard. That night, as I sat in my office drafting plans for the initiative, Marcus's words stayed with me. The summit I envisioned wasn't just about addressing the problem, it was about transforming the culture that allowed it to persist. It was about planting seeds of change that would grow far beyond me. And as I hit save on my notes, I felt a spark of hope. This wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of something greater. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of my office, casting soft golden hues over the rich mahogany desk. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the warmth calm me as I reviewed the first drafts of the summit proposals that Rebecca had compiled. Each document brimmed with potential lists of potential partners, detailed objectives for the event, and ideas for actionable outcomes. Yet, as thorough as they were, I couldn't help but feel something was missing. Rebecca arrived soon after, her stride confident, a tablet in one hand and a notepad in the other. Morning, Elena, she greeted with a smile, settling into the chair opposite my desk. We've had a few more organizations express interest in the summit. I thought we could go over the updated list. I nodded, motioning for her to proceed. Rebecca began outlining key points, her efficiency and clarity shining as always. She mentioned partnerships with leading advocacy groups and plans for panels that would feature a diverse range of voices. There were ideas for workshops on dismantling unconscious bias and sessions on creating equitable workplaces. It's a strong foundation, I said, leaning back in my chair. But I want this to be more than just another corporate event. We need to ensure that the discussions translate into real, measurable action. Rebecca paused, considering my words. What if we have participants make public commitments during the summit? Something tangible, like hiring quotas, mentorship programs, or funding for scholarships. I felt a spark of excitement at the suggestion. Yes, and we can provide them with resources to meet those commitments. Training modules, partnerships with advocacy groups, tools for monitoring progress, something that makes the changes sustainable. Rebecca made quick notes on her tablet, her enthusiasm matching mine. This could set a new standard. Elena, not just for Harper Global, but for the entire industry. As we brainstormed, the framework of the summit began to take on a sharper, more purposeful shape. It wasn't just about talking, it was about building a roadmap for lasting change. Later that afternoon, I decided to step away from the confines of my office. I wandered through the halls of Harper Global headquarters, the sleek design of the building a testament to the company's success. But success wasn't just about numbers, it was about people. And I needed to hear from them. The staff lounge was bustling when I entered, the casual hum of conversation quieting slightly as I appeared. A young woman, visibly surprised, stood quickly. "Miss Harper, we didn't expect to see you here." I smiled warmly, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to stop by and hear from all of you. Your thoughts, your experiences, they matter to me." Hesitation lingered for a moment. But soon, the room opened up. Employees spoke candidly about what they appreciated and where they saw room for improvement. Some shared stories of opportunities they'd been given, while others recounted moments of feeling overlooked. One voice stood out, Thomas, a maintenance worker nearing retirement, who spoke with quiet dignity. "Policies are good," he said, "but culture is what really matters. If the culture doesn't change, The rest won't mean much. His words struck a chord. You're absolutely right, Thomas, I said. Culture isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in spaces like this. And that's where we need to focus. As I left the lounge, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The summit wasn't just about launching a new initiative, it was about laying the foundation for a culture that valued every voice. It was about making sure that change didn't stop at policies but reached every corner of the company. Back in my office, I reviewed the notes Rebecca and I had made earlier. The ideas felt more vivid now, grounded in the real stories I'd just heard. This was more than a project, it was a mission. And I was ready to see it through. And so, what began as a moment of prejudice turned into a powerful journey of accountability, transformation, and hope. Eleanor Harper's unwavering determination not only confronted the biases she faced but also paved the way for change in her company and beyond. This story reminds us that courage and action can inspire a ripple effect, touching lives in unexpected ways. If this tale moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Life Stories. Hit the notification bell to join us for more inspiring narratives that showcase the resilience and strength of the human spirit. Together, let's amplify voices that matter.